Hi folks, in this video we're going to ask the question, why am I still in pain, and try to answer it. I'll explain that it's impossible to answer that precisely for you, but I'm going to give you some food for thought, maybe a different perspective to understand why you've been in pain for so long and why it's not changing. So the first thing to say would be that just a sort of a general disclaimer is that this isn't medical advice. This shouldn't replace any standard treatment, any necessary treatment. I simply want to offer you just my own perspective, perhaps a different way of thinking of things, a different way of looking at things, so you can gain more clarity as to why you're in pain. So again, this is going to be for anyone who is in pain, you've been in pain for a long time and you don't really have any answers. You've tried a lot of different things and yeah, you simply don't have any answers and you would like answers. So like I said, this isn't medical advice, it's just food for thought. So the first thing we want to consider is, obviously some people have lifelong disorders, genetic disorders. I can't speak for that. That's something separate. However, I would say most conditions aren't genetic. A lot of conditions that we would tend to just sort of pass off as, oh, it's just the way it is, or it runs in the family, aren't actually that. They just seem to happen. They're not hardwired. They're not something that we're bound to experience, but we can get caught up in that sort of thinking based on what a doctor might say, and often what a doctor says isn't necessarily rooted in enough assessment. It's simply almost like a catch-all term, and it's just something to give you an answer because maybe they don't have an answer. So what I would say is that lifelong conditions that you're simply going to have to deal with and have to accept are actually quite rare. And the challenge with that is that there's this fine balance between giving people false hope and then also giving people nothing to look forward to. I'd like to err on the side of giving people a bit of something to aim for, something to keep them positive, because even if your condition has no cure now, it doesn't mean that it never will have a cure. And it also means that it doesn't have a cure now to the best of our knowledge. Maybe there's something that hasn't been found. Maybe there's something that hasn't been looked at in the right way. So I'd always err on the side of, don't get too bogged down in the condition you're in. Accept that this is what you're dealing with now, but also don't accept that you're necessarily going to have to live with that for the rest of your life. Okay, so let's get on to what pain actually is. So you're in pain, you've been in pain for a long time, and you've tried a lot of different things. You've been to doctors, physios, consultants, you've tried all the crazy stuff, not crazy stuff, but you've tried the alternative things, acupuncture, even energy healing, whatever it is, you've tried it all and you're not really getting anywhere, or you're sort of going up and down, you're yo-yoing, but you're not making any meaningful progress. So first we want to kind of understand what pain is. Pain ultimately it's a request for change. So, and it's driven by stress in a very general sense. So when I say stress, I don't mean anxiety necessarily. That can be part of it. But stress is basically any kind of demand on your body that you cannot meet. So that could be a lack of sleep. It could be insufficient nutrition. It could be poor quality nutrition. It could be nutritional deficiencies, dehydration, overhydration, which is a thing. People tend to think they're too dehydrated rather than overhydrated. It can be all sorts of things: pollution, mental, emotional stress, work, deadlines, whatever it is. Anything that's demanding on your body that you're not able to mitigate effectively. So stress is always the driving factor when we have any chronic health issue. The body is very good at coping. It will keep on going as long as it can, but then we have a pain, or we have a health condition that seems to appear out of nowhere, but it's not really out of nowhere. It's just that final, it's that final warning signal. And what I would say is that there are usually several warning signals before that point, but we don't have the awareness to pick those up, or we kind of just brush them off and say, oh, it's fine, because we'll keep going because we have to keep going. And that's one of the great things about the body, and it's a great thing about the resilience of the body, is that we can keep going for quite some time before things get really bad. And when things get really bad, you can be certain that your body has been working very hard and things have been culminating to that point for quite a while. So excess stress is always going to be the driving factor. And what you experience, be it pain, be it high cholesterol, be it a heart disease, or be it diabetes, whatever lifestyle illness you get, the way I think of it is that's just sort of the result of a million different little things interacting before that point. So rather than getting focused on that diagnosis, be it high cholesterol, be it pain, be it depression, be it whatever it is, we need to look at what came before. What's the environment that created that outcome? And often when people have, a lot of people I've dealt with chronic pain issues, it usually comes with issues like depression and mental health issues, and then often digestive issues, nutritional issues. So these things aren't separate. They're all interacting within the one body, and we basically need to treat you as an individual rather than treat your diagnosis. And that's a lot of the challenge with going the traditional route of treatment, or even a lot of the alternative routes of treatment, is that you're treating a diagnosis, you're treating numbers on a chart, you're treating a blood test result, and we need to treat the person, because the person and the life they're living, and the experiences they've had are what have resulted in this health condition. So that's the way we need to look at things. So I would say if you're still in pain and you've been dealing with pain for a long time, it's because everything that's going on in your life, or several aspects of what's been going on in your life, have just been adding up and adding up and adding up, and you get to a breaking point, and that is that low back pain, that chronic neck pain, that whatever it is. And then it's also those other things that you kind of just accept as normal, like acid reflux or bloating or IBS or low mood or lack of sleep or poor sleep issues. They're all just breadcrumbs, and they're all just details in the overall picture. So let's see, I've got some notes. I'm just going to check my notes. Okay, so what I'm going to do is explain, sort of give you a hypothetical case of how this might happen, how chronic pain might happen, and why it might appear to not have a clear cause. So, like I said, it's not just pain, it's everything else that's happening. I'll use this example first. If you have high cholesterol, you go to your doctor and he says, look, you've got high cholesterol. That didn't happen overnight. That's a series of life experiences and decisions, usually nutritional decisions, that leads to that point. It doesn't happen overnight. It grows and grows and grows, and you get to a point where you have high cholesterol and you want to treat that. And chronic pain is usually like that. Even when there is a clear injury point, a time at which you were injured, there was likely a build up to that point where you became susceptible to an injury. So maybe you were run down. And usually it's actually quite interesting, is there's research in, I think it was secondary school or college athletes, and their injury rate increased at around the time of exams, and basically what they inferred from that was, and the conclusion from that was, because of the excess stress around times of exams, they are more susceptible to injury because their body is more depleted, it's more run down, it's more on edge, and it's less adaptable. So that's sort of a small idea of what's happening in these chronic pain issues, is that we have a lot of things just kind of get out of hand. And again, because we can always keep going, because we can always cope, and we can always just kind of put it off, we have this accumulated stuff and these accumulated stresses and challenges, and we get this breaking point, and the breaking point is I slip a disc, or I spoke to a lady there recently, and she was talking about how, and this is really common, which is why I bring it up, she hurt her back and it required surgery, and basically she was doing nothing. She was doing nothing when it happened. She didn't do a big movement, a big sudden anything, but she moved very slightly, and then it seized up, and then she went to the hospital, and they're like, oh, this is going on, you need surgery and all that. And so the point there is that it's not that her spine was that fragile that she can't move, it's that all of this stuff was happening leading up to this moment, and a sudden movement, or a movement that the brain was a bit unready for, was enough to create that tension and to create something to happen, to create a breaking point that seems far beyond the actual stress on the body. So essentially this is what we're looking at. So like I said, I'm going to give you a hypothetical case of pain. So you're an office worker, you develop chronic back pain. You're not an active person, you don't do sports, you've never had any injuries, you've never had any fractures in your life, you've never had any significant injuries. But now you've got back pain, and it's crippling, and you feel it all the time. So how does that happen? And you might be thinking, oh, I've got bad posture and all this, that, and the other. And that might only be a very small part of the puzzle. But again, hypothetically, you go to college, your lifestyle gets less healthy, you're eating bad food, you're going out a lot, you're not sleeping that well, and then you're thrust into the big bad world, the real world, and you're going into a job that you're not prepared for, and you're stressed, and you're having to deal with that, and you're not sleeping at night, you're ordering takeaways, you're eating poorly, you're skipping breakfast, you're having your first meal as a coffee, a black coffee, and basically you have all these little unhealthy things adding up, and maybe you have relationship issues, maybe your long-term partner has broken up with you, if you've broken up with them, you're not getting along with your co-workers, you've got a long commute, maybe you don't like your job, maybe this is never what you wanted to do, and basically it's sort of that simple. It's all of these little things that kind of add up, and they lead to tension in the body, and they lead to stress in the body, and your breathing is very shallow, you're unable to breathe fully into your belly, you breathe into your chest quite fast, you're always on edge, even though you don't think of yourself as being on edge, because this has happened so gradually that you just kind of take it as normal, and you just kind of take it as part of life. And then one day you maybe move a certain way, and your back is kind of stiff, and then you're sitting, and suddenly you've got back pain. It just kind of grows, and it's sore, and it doesn't really get any better, and it just kind of spirals. And then you get to a point then where every day you have back pain, and you've had back pain every day for the past few months, and it doesn't make any sense. And so this is early in the whole thing, and you might then go to a physio, you might go for a massage, you might go to your doctor, and your doctor might order an x-ray, and they might find nothing, or they might find something, and that something might not be actually related to your pain, because I won't go into this in too much detail, but X-rays on MRIs are not very predictive of causes of pain, so we can't see a spine in an X-ray and predict whether pain will occur, and if we see damage on the spine, we can't say with any confidence that that's going to lead to pain. It's one of these really challenging things to understand, but that's what the evidence has shown repeatedly. So I won't go into it in much more detail, but point being is you might get a diagnosis, and it's quite likely that your doctor isn't up to date on the latest pain science research. They're a general practitioner, they deal with general things, and their approach to something like back pain is going to be take a couple of weeks off and here are some painkillers, and if it doesn't get better, then maybe we go for surgery or something extreme like that. But the point being is you might go for all sorts of treatments, massage, physio, acupuncture, and they're going to have all sorts of reasons for why you're in pain. They're going to say, oh, your posture, and they'll sell you an expensive chair, or they'll give you orthotics, and they'll give you this, that, and the other, and they'll say that your meridians are out. Again, I'm not knocking these things necessarily. I'm just saying that they're looking at a very small window of what's going on, and they're not considering, well, how did your life get to a point where you just developed chronic crippling back pain out of nowhere? What is your life satisfaction like? What are your sleep levels like? Are you eating enough? Are you eating well enough? Are you hydrated, overhydrated? Whatever it is, what's going on? How are you dealing with your mental and emotional stress? Do you feel fulfilled in life? Do you have a support network? Do you have a shoulder to cry on, and all that sort of stuff? And because most practitioners don't really do this, or they don't really, they might, but on a very superficial level, you kind of don't really see the relevance of it. And we've gotten to a point where I'm perhaps saying this to you, and hopefully it's not brand new, and hopefully it's not a crazy idea to you, but for some it's going to be quite an odd idea that your sleep quality and that your relationships and that your life satisfaction has anything to do with your chronic back pain. I feel like it shouldn't be an odd idea, but for some people it is going to be a really weird idea, and they might even stop the video right now. But the problem is, because we don't talk about it in these terms, and most practitioners don't think of pain in these terms, we just assume that it's not relevant, but it absolutely is relevant, because well, I'll get to that at the end, why that's relevant. But my point is that your pain grows out of all of these things, and when you've been trying all the treatments, you've perhaps become an expert. And that was my experience of dealing with pain, is that for me it got to the point that I decided I was going to become a physical therapist. And I understand that for most people that's not going to be what they want to do, and they shouldn't have to do. They shouldn't have to become a physical therapist to figure out the way to resolve their pain. So it's quite likely that you've tried a lot of different therapies, and you've found ones that you like and found ones that you don't like, and you maybe feel like a bit of an expert in that sense, but you're not getting better. So this is when we need to look at that bigger picture. We need to look at your life. What is the life that you're living that has led to you experiencing this? So why is this relevant? Because pain is, and this is the bottom line, this is the take-home message. Pain is most commonly a signal, I'm going to check my notes, is most commonly a signal that your brain perceives something threatening. So your body has no incentive to keep you in pain. Okay, so you're thinking, why am I still in pain? And the challenging thing is that in some cases people will be told that their pain is all in their head and that they're making it up. And that can be it's not a pleasant thing to hear, because you don't want your pain, certainly not consciously. But your body has no incentive to create pain unless it serves a purpose, and that purpose might not be rational, and that's a key point. That purpose might be an unconscious, irrational fear of something. It's trying to discourage you or protect you from something. So I'll take a very simple example. If I touch a hot stove, I will soon learn that a hot stove will burn me and will hurt me. So my brain knows that I shouldn't touch a hot stove. So it's always going to discourage me from doing that. And that's something I understand consciously. But what happens usually with injuries is that our brain will begin to associate the events and the details of the injury with pain. So again, in a very simple, blunt example would be like, you play football and you hurt yourself playing football, therefore football causes pain, therefore I don't play football. So that's just in very simple terms, but this happens in very subtle and intricate ways where we create associations with things and we create fears with things, and these are largely unconscious. So while you might not, while you wouldn't have any fear of football, your body associates certain positions, certain movements with an old injury and with significant pain. So it's going to discourage you from doing that. So your body is always trying to protect you, and its number one goal is always survival, it's always survival basically, and assuring your survival. And it's otherwise, the other thing is your pain is trying to draw your attention to something. So I touch a hot stove, I withdraw, because if I didn't, I would burn my hand if I kept my hand there. So my brain is telling me that that's hot, that could damage me, that could burn me, that could hurt me, so don't do that. Now, hopefully that's fairly obvious to you. You're getting a sense of, my body is trying to protect me. It might be irrational, and I will explain this. And this is largely to do with our movements. When we have a lot of accumulated injuries, even injuries that aren't that significant, we'll tend to change the way we move. And so over time, even though the injuries aren't significant, we're reducing our movement capacity and we're making ourselves less adaptable. And then when we're in an awkward position, because we no longer have control of that, that's when an injury occurs, because our brain overreacts and thinks, this is where that injury happened, or I'm not confident here, or I'm not strong here, or I associate this with that old pain or that old injury. And this is all happening unconsciously, and we can't rationalize it. What we can do, however, is to create safety in the body by exploring movement. That's why things like somatics, even yoga, Pilates can be really helpful, because they're very gentle movements that allow us to experience ranges of motion and help the brain reconnect to the body and reassure it that things are now safe. Okay, so hopefully that's clear enough. What I'm going to go on to now is a more controversial take on the purpose of pain. And I think this is less likely, but I think it does happen. There's this idea that in some cases pain, some would argue in all cases, but I would disagree, but pain is distracting you from a bigger issue. Now, it's absolutely possible that because your body is always trying to keep you safe, well, the way you can see this is denial in people. And I use this example in my newsletter. I watch Gordon Ramsay's Kitchen Nightmares. It's a great show. It's bad TV. I mean, it's reality TV, and it's ridiculous and it's formulaic, but I find it entertaining. And it's really interesting because if you've never watched it, and if you're not familiar, basically it's restaurants that are failing. They get in touch with Gordon Ramsay. He goes in and he sees what's wrong. Is it management? Is it the kitchen? Is it the food? Is it, whatever? And he figures out, and usually in his sort of abrasive style, he just shouts at everyone, and usually it's owners and staff that are really stubborn and they argue. And it's funny that these people will seek out Gordon Ramsay's help, so presumably they're familiar with the show. And so presumably they've seen that every single show has the same format of complete denial, of a chef being like, my food is the best on the planet, literally, he's not going to have a problem with the food, and then they microwave some crab cakes in a soggy boot, and they share that and they serve that to him, and then he's disgusted with it and they're in complete shock. And this happens routinely where they're completely in denial about how bad their food is or how bad their service is. They scream at their customers, yet they don't understand why customers don't want to come to their restaurant. So human beings have this tremendous capacity for denial and for blinding ourselves to the truth when the truth hurts. And now these are really extreme entertaining examples, which is why they made a TV show out of it, but it happens on small levels. And this is something I've talked a lot about in my newsletter. It's this idea of resistance or benign resistance, little things where you make your life slightly easier. You're essentially self-sabotaging. You're stopping yourself or discouraging yourself from doing the thing that you need to do, but you're doing it in a way that you can stand behind, you can rationalize. I won't go to training because I'm tired, I need extra rest, I'm overtraining, or I've got to get up early in the morning. And that might be very much a legitimate excuse. It might be a very legitimate reason. I don't know, it depends. But that's the point, is that can very easily be a legitimate excuse. So you'll put that in when you should do something different. And again, these are fairly benign instances of that. But back to this idea that pain is a distraction. Basically, pain, you might be feeling pain so that you don't confront some sort of greater issue, and usually that's some sort of mental and emotional stress. And that's why I talk about, are you fulfilled in your life? Are you doing the things you want? Are you in a relationship that's going nowhere? Are you in a job that you hate that's soul destroying, or whatever it is? And there's no easy way to figure that out other than to simply hear it, to simply hear what I'm saying and say, okay, maybe this is it. And then I like to think of this as, and this isn't my own original idea, but it's like a thought virus, or like a positive thought virus. Suddenly you're filtering your life through a different filter. This idea, you start to notice the times when you create resistance or the things that you're avoiding, and you start to see that, okay, maybe I don't want to confront that, or maybe this is an issue for me, and pain creates a welcome distraction. And again, you have to consider that if the pain is that bad and it's that consistent and persistent, it's likely something quite challenging that you're being protected from, because pain it's no fun, it's no joke, and I say that with experience. It has to be something quite significant that you're shielding yourself from. So I simply want to have you be open to that idea, and it's something that I am really focusing on now, this idea of understanding the mental, emotional, the mind-body aspect of chronic pain, because I think we know the rest. The rest is covered. You know how to stretch your hip. We know how to strengthen your low back and all that sort of stuff. We don't need more of that, but we need to begin talking about this side of things, this bigger picture. And so if you're interested in that, get in touch, because I'll have the course made by then. I don't have it made, but in the new year I will. So if you're watching this in 2019, get in touch, because that course is available now. So the next bit is similar, and it's this idea of pain serving a purpose, and you getting what we call secondary gain from the pain. And this can be a tough pill to swallow, but it is possible that you gain from being in pain. You might gain comfort, you might gain sympathy, and that sympathy might be something that you felt you never had, or that you felt you deserved but never got. And this is one of those intricacies of, again, of your experience of pain. So what happens when you're in pain? Maybe, again, we'll take two hypothetical instances or two hypothetical examples. So the first one would be, maybe you lived a life of neglect. You didn't have much support from your parents, much love, or encouragement or anything like that. And anytime you're upset or you're crying, you're told, oh, grow up or man up or whatever it is. And then you hurt yourself. And now the people in your life offer you sympathy, and they offer you care, and they offer you love, and they offer you, they take care of you. And this is more likely when it's a really significant injury, where you're maybe in hospital or something. And you just get all of this nurturing and all of this positive reinforcement, and you're like, well, I lived all my life before this and I never had this, and now I have this, I finally have this, and it's contingent on my pain. And obviously you're not thinking this consciously, but it's very much a chemical thing. It's almost like an addiction. You get that positive reinforcement, you get a dopamine hit, and then what your brain will do is anytime you get a dopamine hit, you're reinforcing everything that immediately surrounds that dopamine hit. So they see this with drug addicts. It's quite easy to get them sober, to get them clean from drugs in a controlled environment. But once they go back out into the real world, they'll fall into their habits because they're back in that environment, and they associate that environment. They associate all of their actions and their interactions and the people they're around and the places they're in. They associate those with, taking a drug. So for example, if I ate an apple and looked at a picture of a dog, and I ate 10 apples a day, and each time I looked at a picture of a dog, and then I somehow created an addiction to apples. This is a bad example, but something addictive, and I looked at a picture of a dog, and then I went to a rehab center and they got me clean, and then if someone showed me a picture of a dog, I would have this urge because I'd have this association, and I would associate the pleasure of the drug I was taking with the visual of a dog. So when I would be confronted, now that I'm clean, confronted with a picture of a dog back in my real world environment, I would have my brain chemistry would be saying, where's the drug? I need the drug, because I'm associating it with that picture. Again, this is probably not the best example, but the point being is that we'll have secondary gain from being in pain, and we will come to appreciate that, and that's going to be worth the pain that we're in. And it will essentially, it's this idea of denial, and the pain serves as some sort of secondary gain, and I would say this is quite rare, this happening on a full-blown scale, but it absolutely does happen. And I don't know that there's any way of resolving that other than it's very much a personal thing. It's to be confronted with the idea, and to be open to the idea, and to start chipping away at your own alibi, essentially. You've got all these reasons for why you do what you do, and now you've got a little grain of doubt, and maybe out of curiosity you're just going to start chipping away at your reasons for doing things, and you might come to the realization that you've been gaining from being in pain. And maybe it's quite a benign thing, and you don't really realize, and you're like, well, this is silly, why have I been doing this? And it's that challenge between the conscious, more rational part of the brain, and then the unconscious, survival focused part of the brain that's just going to hold on to this even though it makes no sense, but it associates it with survival, and it associates it with pleasure because of all those chemical associations. So it is also quite possible that You will hear something like this and think, okay, yeah, and start to see it in your life and think, okay, this is silly. And then you can take just some proactive steps to undo that. And so I suppose this is the next bit about the pain, and why, again, bringing it back to the original question, why am I still in pain? I've tried everything. I've done all the right things. Why am I still in pain? I would say part of it is the culture we have around treatment and around care. We have very much this culture that we go to someone to be fixed. Most healthcare isn't preventative, and people will talk all day about, you know, we should have preventative healthcare, but we don't really tend to do that. And that would be one of the arguments for a different healthcare system, but that's a political rant for another day. But my point is that, like I said, with something like high cholesterol, it doesn't happen overnight. It builds over time, and it becomes apparent one day because you're not feeling well, maybe, and you go to your doctor and he has a blood test, and there it is. But again, it didn't happen overnight. So why are we that sounded odd. Why are we continuously outsourcing our health? And why we are is maybe simply because we assume that's what we do. That's the culture. And I would encourage you to begin to take control of your health. And it's quite likely that, again, as I mentioned before, you've tried a lot of things and you've sort of taken control in a sense, but maybe you're still stuck in that I need to be fixed. I'm taking control and I'm seeking out solutions, but I'm seeking out the right fixer. So you're still in that role of being fixed rather than being in control of being fixed and finding the right person to assist you with that, which is a different thing. And this is something I went into in detail in my last video on my own experience with pain. So I won't go into this in too much detail, but basically I think what I've learned from dealing with pain for years and then being driven to learn about pain because of my own pain, and then actually dealing with people in pain as a physical therapist, what I've learned is that it's not so much about the therapy. You don't have a deficiency in chiropractic, you don't have a deficiency in acupuncture, you don't have a deficiency in massage or a certain medication. Those can help, but your environment, your internal condition is such that you have pain, and you need to grasp that. You need to be in control and in charge of that, and that's it. And until you take ownership for that and you know how to, and you have the guidance to do that, pain is likely going to keep on happening or keep on reoccurring because you're not taking ownership of it, and you're always outsourcing your health. And again, I'd simply ask that you be open to that idea, and that you see the issue with healthcare in general. So that most conditions people go into the doctor with are preventable. They're preventable through very simple means, and the conditions that are really bad, they're much the same. It's just that they've gone on for that much longer. And truly genetic issues that are unavoidable, that are just the luck of the draw, unfortunately, those kinds of conditions are truly rare, and it's quite unlikely that you have one of those. And if you do have one of those, then that would likely have been found if your doctor has done all the appropriate tests. So I think that's it in sort of in summation. I will say that the bottom line is your body has no incentive to be in pain unless it perceives some sort of threat. So if you're sore when you move, it's because your brain thinks it's unsafe to move, and you need to regain that confidence in movement. and that's going to come through movement exploration, through creating safety in the body. And it all boils down to stress. Your body is one system. It's not loads of separate systems where your joint pain is entirely divorced from your organ function or whatever it is. Everything is working in concert. So stress in one area is going to have ripple effects throughout the body. So we need to look at everything. Are you sleeping well? What is your mood like? Is your mood stable? Are you eating enough? Are you enjoying your food? Are you always cold? Do you have what is your libido like? What is your regularity like? How often are you going to the toilet? Are you constipated? Do you have diarrhea? Whatever it is. What are all these other symptoms that are going on that seem unrelated? Are there a lot of these things going on? And try to be honest with yourself, and we can go from there. So I've given you a lot of stuff hopefully to think about, and maybe you're a bit more confused than you were at the start, and that's often the way, because this stuff can be quite overwhelming. What I would say is that while it might seem more complicated, it actually gives you more power. So we're looking, maybe you've been in pain and all you've been focused on is the area of pain, or even if not just the area of pain, you're simply looking at your bones and your muscles, and you're not looking at your organ systems and your mood and all that. And now this seems all a bit overwhelming. And I understand that, because now you've got way more things to consider and to worry about. The good thing is that the body is self-organizing. And this is one of those key principles that we need to grasp. Your body knows what to do. And the only reason it maybe isn't doing it, again, why am I still in pain? The only reason it's not doing it is because maybe it can't, because it doesn't have the resources. And the analogy I use is that there is everything has a cost. So living a certain way, not sleeping, not having breakfast, being stressed, having a job you hate, not moving much or whatever it is, that has a cost. So that, say that costs €2,000 per month, but what you're putting back in is only €1,500 per month. So you're always going to have a deficit, and you're always going to be running yourself into the ground, because your body simply doesn't have the raw materials to match the demands. So that's one of those key principles that we need to understand. So if we're still in pain, we don't know why we're in pain, it boils down to some deficit somewhere, and we need to begin to look at the entire body. And so, like I said, this might be more confusing, but the good thing is that because the body is self-organizing, if we treat stress in a very general sense, if we improve sleep, if we get more time outdoors, fresh air, nurturing relationships, outlets, sports, social functions, whatever it is, a job we enjoy more, something fulfilling, hobbies that are fulfilling, self-expression, all these things, the body will take care of itself. And if that's not enough, then we can go into more detail and we can do more specific tests. And basically that's where I come in. That's the work I do, is acting more like a detective and seeing what's going on here, how can we change this, and give you the tools to control that. So don't worry if this all seems a bit overwhelming. The way you can start is you can sign up for my free Ultimate Guide to Pain. It's only going to be free for another little while, so sign up for that while it's free. Get in touch on Facebook. I've got a group, like a support group, where we talk about these things and I share all of my resources. I'm working on a course as well that's going to specifically guide you through this intensive process, and that's my main main approach to treatment. And then I do private treatments as well, private consultations, where, like I said, I act like a detective, and we work together and we figure this out, and we figure out where in the big picture, where is that deficit, where are the needs not being met, and so on. But point being is, don't worry, there's a lot of resources out there. We've got a lot of free resources. I'm going to link them in the show notes or in the bottom, and you can let me know if you have any questions. So if you've watched this far, I really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Please share this with anyone you know who might need it. Follow me on Instagram. Do all that stuff. You know, you've heard this before. Do all the social media stuff, and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.